I'm going to talk about narcissistic victim syndrome, which mostly in training you probably wouldn't have heard of. I think it's a fairly recent term. I think Sam Vaknin actually is credited with having been the originator of that as a phrase, and he talks about the profile of victims of narcissism. And, you know, I looked at this little list, and on the face of it, it doesn't actually quite capture I don't think, the being on the receiving end of psychological terrorism. But there's fear, extreme independence. It seems like an odd one, and that stems from I think more so with children of narcissistic parents. They are so used to not having their needs met by their parent, of doing stuff for themselves. They get used to being the person who sees to everybody else, and they find it difficult actually to receive care, to allow themselves to be cared for. And if somebody says, would you like me to do that for you? No, I'll do it myself. But so the word there is extreme. It's to a degree where they are not receiving or allowing themselves to be cared for. Because in their growing up, they haven't got that receiving care neurons. They're used to not receiving, but actually to giving. Anxiety, high anxiety, because the unpredictability, either with a narcissistic parent or partner, or even in the workplace actually, the anxiety is about the unpredictability, not knowing from 1 minute to the next, like that reference there from Heather. Not knowing, are they going to fly off the handle? So they get into the habit of almost taking the words out of their mouth and examining them and put them back in again before they speak them, and constantly trying to second guess what kind of a mood is he or she going to be in. So they finish up, they don't trust their own judgment. They have very low self-esteem, especially partners. They will have been criticised every aspect of their being. I think you might agree. You know, physical, mental, emotional. You know, and it's all. If you weren't so fat, if you were a bit more intelligent, if you were better a housekeeper, or better at sex, or better at everything, then I wouldn't have to behave this way. Look what you're doing to me. But also many, if not all, of the victims of narcissism have some degree of post-traumatic stress, if not post-traumatic stress disorder. There is complex PTSD, and I would say many of the victims of narcissistic abuse, if they've been in a relationship for many years, then it is kind of like they've been in a war zone, and it tends to be classified as complex PTSD. And it's hyper everything. They're hyper anxious, hyper aroused, you know, just in a constant state of don't know how to be, really. There's no peace or calm. I know when I finished, I was like, I'm small, as you can see, but I was 6'2". I was a bag of bones at the end of it, and a nervous wreck. And you know, that not trusting your own judgment, not knowing if you can trust your own judgment. And then, of course, when people manage to get free of that, it's different for different people, but certainly for me and for many others, it's kind of not trusting your own judgment about getting into another relationship, because if you got that one so badly wrong, like there's no way that's ever going to happen to me again, and you can finish up staying out of, and our clients do the same, staying out of relationships for a long time out of fear of repeating the situation. Contrary-wise, some people not really understanding the problem. I mean, I did get a handle on the problem fairly quickly and realised that that was a really bad situation. And also I understood it was very damaging for my children, and I needed to really make sure I had got my act together before I even thought about other relationships. So, but some other people I noticed would get back into another relationship and actually would repeat the whole same scenario because they still had that blind spot about narcissism, because they are so plausible at the beginning. And it is easy for people to fall into the same trap. This image I thought was quite good. This is your brain on complex post-traumatic stress. Clients who present to us, or supervisees who present to us with reports of their clients, they may not actually, you may not, because these all say, sometimes I wish I was dead, I feel spacey, like I can't think straight, I have nightmares. The secret and part of the skill for us as therapists and practitioners is to be able to join up all these subtle little dots, because they create a picture. Each one in themselves may not seem very hefty, but if you start to see a cluster of these things emerging, you start to think post-traumatic stress. And actually, if the person's been in a long-term situation with this, you don't know whether, but you start to ask clarifying questions, so the person can actually, and part of their recovery and their therapy is being able to see a profile emerging, to see a picture, and to begin to, I get it. Wow, that was me. And actually, there's great therapeutic value in the recognition of, hell, that explains why I feel so awful. And I think particularly for the children of a narcissistic parent to realize, yeah, that's what I've been on the receiving end of. God, and that explains some of my behaviours and why I avoid this and steer clear of that. And actually they can start to feel relieved in a way, because often if it's a parent, they feel they should be making more of an effort to make the relationship okay. And actually they realise, you know what, no matter what they did, it was never going to be okay. And they can give up flogging a dead horse. So getting to the therapeutic end of things, there's a cognitive dissonance. People who've lived with gaslighting and the getting to not trusting their own judgment, there's what they think their situation is, but then there's what they're being told by their partner or ex-partner or parent. It's what other people around them have perceived and are feeding back to them. And even solicitors, saying, oh no, don't worry about that, that won't happen. Oh, he'd go to jail if he did that. And, the woman saying, yeah, but he wouldn't care about that. He would still, oh no, he would never do that. Not having a voice with professionals, because professionals don't understand the very subtle dynamics that nobody's seeing, because it is invisible. It is like the iceberg thing. There's only the tip that some close friends and family start to pick up. there's something not okay here. But all the subtleties of it, nobody ever gets to see or hear. And the victim is trying to communicate with people, but they've got this notion of, well, is it me? Maybe it is me. And they go through this, well, I'll try a bit harder. I'll try to be a better this, that, or something else, and maybe that, of course, it never makes any difference. So they are living with psychological terrorism, and I think that really is a good word for it. There's a lot of grief. Any relationship breaking down is like a bereavement, and there's grief, and there's a mourning for the loss of what was hoped for, and so that, that's in the normal run of things. But on top of all of the other stuff, it's even worse. So there is post-traumatic stress or complex traumatic stress, and people don't even realize that they're in that. And not all professionals that they come into contact with identify the signs, which makes it all more difficult. If you want to know the difference between the PTSD and complex PTSD, the main difference is that it's over time. There is a sense of feeling that their life is in danger, that they could be killed, and that they're trapped. There is no way out of it. And if you think about what I've just gone through, the isolation, the cutting off from family and friends, the smear campaigns, the person does feel isolated. And of course, they've been threatened. I'm thinking of being in court in a case going on, and the judge saying to the man in question, well, is it true that you said you'd kill her? And him saying, yeah, but she knows I wouldn't do that. There've been many other injuries, but she knows. And, he's saying regularly, if you take my kids, you're dead. Yeah. So there's all those kind of things. And actually, for the victim does believe that could happen, that they could be killed. So, and actually, do you know what? Your heart could go out to them, because mostly they're left to pick up the pieces themselves, really, because even to access therapy is difficult. The statutory services are not really up to the job. The people working are not well trained in these things, and even private therapy, they haven't got the money for it. So, it's kind of walking wounded. So the problems are exacerbated by lack of professional awareness. And really, the time has come now. There is a bit of a wave. In some ways, maybe the Harvey Weinsteins of this world are being helpful in triggering a wave of awareness. And we've just got to keep that going. So I remember there was a time when I chaired what was then the Domestic Violence Forum in Plymouth. And so the forum consisted of the professional networks around the agencies around the city, and any difficult or complex cases were discussed. We would meet monthly. And, it was just staggering, the lack of awareness, really. I mean, it was a domestic violence forum, but actually a lot of professionals who turned up from various agencies, their knowledge of just even basic domestic abuse was really not much. I mean, I'm remembering the time when they used to say at MPFS, of course we don't have domestic violence in the services. I mean, I really believed it, So the question is, well, what the professionals will be saying, well, why doesn't she just leave? And you knew if somebody was coming out with a statement like that they had no clue what they were talking about. Well, why doesn't she just leave? Well, why does she stay with them? Well, why did she go back to him? You know, the statistics, I don't know if there's a change in the statistics, but from many years ago, women on average would go back 8 times before they actually managed to stay away and not go back. So the implication is that some went back or left more than 8 times. If it was on average 8 times. And that is a bit puzzling to most people, but professionals working with these clients really need to know why. And I'm going to tell you why. So how do people get involved with narcissistic partners? The frog in the boiling water, the theory is, or the hypothesis is, that if you put a frog in a pan of boiling water, it'll just leap straight out again. It'll just won't even, it'll be out quick as a flash. If the frog is put into a pan of cold water and put over the gas, and it gradually comes to the boil, the frog will sit there and be boiled to death. And I think it's an excellent metaphor for women and men as well, but women tend to find it more difficult to escape from these situations than men do. And usually there's children involved and they don't want to leave the children. But the point is, they are like that frog. The water has gradually been getting warmer and warmer, and it's getting hotter and hotter, and actually they finish up that they're getting boiled to death. And actually, if you happen to be the child of a narcissistic parent, well, you can't get out. There is no escape. Where are you going to go? So, and then of course, often what happens is they'll get into trouble at school, and then the teachers are picking on them and saying how awful they are, which gives the parent more leverage to give them a hard time, and it goes on.